Beach. How about that?
Hey, everybody, this is Joseph. Welcome to the Fired Up Network. Welcome to the NFL Blitz, and welcome to the NFL Draft. With me is broadcasting legend Stormin' Norm Rumack, and we got a special surprise here from Indianapolis. Fame writer Philip Wilson. Philip, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Joseph?
Good. Let's get to it. All right. It looks like Tennessee is going to pick their quarterback. Now, what happens in 2 with Cleveland and the Giants and all that? Because there's rumors that they're going to trade the pick, trade up. They need more draft picks. If you were a GM in Cleveland and the Giants, and for that matter, Tennessee, is Cam Ward the number 1 pick in your eyes?
Yeah, when the Titans brass came out yesterday and said they had made their mind up already, they were basically telling everybody, don't bother calling us because we already know who we're taking, and their need is so obvious. You read an awful lot about how this is not a quarterback-rich draft. I've read a lot of people suggest it's Cam Ward, and then everybody else is going to drop down a lot. And I've been doing a lot of reading since Norm got a hold of me and said he wanted to talk to me. I was all thrilled to hear from my old buddy Norm Rumack. I didn't know he was a legend, but that's pretty cool.
Well,
that was like, wow, the legend now.
I'm contracted to say that.
Don't worry, Phil. I didn't know. Phil, I didn't know I was a legend either.
Well, I thought we were just friends. I don't have many friends who are legends, so it got me nervous. But I tried to bone up a little bit and read a little more. And because, I cover the Colts. I got a couple stories of the Colts later, and they don't pick till, middle draft. But everything I've seen on most of the mocks has Cam Ward going to the Titans and Travis Hunter going to the Browns, and then Penn State pass rusher Abdul Carter going to the Giants. Now, you could find fault with 2 and 3. I certainly do, because unfortunately, I think Deion Sanders' boys are maybe a little too full of themselves, and I don't buy a guy thinking he can come to the NFL and play both ways and be great. Hunter might be that guy, and the latest mock I read from a couple people said that Hunter's a done deal at 2 to the Browns. I don't know. I just know that I don't expect the quarterback to go again after Cam Ward for a while, and I have seen Abdul Carter play a little bit. I watched him a bit. He looks as legit as you could ask for as a pass rusher out of Penn State.
Hey, Philip Wilson is our guest. He's a 2-time author. We'll talk about his books a little bit later in the show. He's joined us, a veteran of the Indianapolis Star, covering the Colts and the NFL for a long time. And Phil, I read it was a great one-liner, so to speak, in The Athletic, a great publication in their look at the NFL draft. And they quoted an unnamed NFL head coach as saying, there's not exactly any Robert De Niro's in the first 10 picks. So, in other words, it's like it's a pretty, unless you're completely devoid of watching movies, you know what that means. And I think most of our viewers and listeners know exactly what that means. Do you agree with that statement that it's an okay draft, but not the sort of thing that NFL Films will have a massive documentary about, likely?
Well, it's interesting because I hadn't heard that quote, and I instantly love that quote. By the way, I need to use that, in some way, shape, or form. If somebody asks me if I'm impressed with something, I'll say, well, there's not a lot of Robert De Niro's here in this thing. I love that. I think it's because the draft is always so fixated on quarterbacks, and it's always such a sexy thing to pick a quarterback. And then you look at this one, and even Cam Ward has question marks a little bit. And so you could make the argument that the number 1 overall pick is not a sure thing, whereas we've seen it. I know here in Indy, we saw it twice. We saw Peyton Manning in 98 and then Andrew Luck in 2012. And I was as sure about Andrew as anybody. You're not sure. And so if you're not sure about the number 1 guy, how sure are you about Travis Hunter? Well, I already told you I don't like a kid telling me I got to play both ways or I'll quit football. You already got way too much attitude. You're going to come in here against grown men now. You're not playing Colorado competition. So maybe you make it as a wide receiver. Maybe you get your butt dusted as a corner. Now what's the team going to do? So I'm down to Abdul Carter, who I've seen, beat a pretty good offensive tackle replacement for Ohio State for 2 sacks because he's that flat out that good of a pass rusher. His speed is really good. And yet he's coming off an injury. So everybody says, well, he's healed. So you get down to 4 and 5 and even 6. You think, what about Boise State running back Ashton Junty? Who looks like a stud, but he was Boise State. And running through a lot of guys that maybe had no business trying to tackle him. Maybe he's not NFL ready. So there are questions about a lot of picks. The one offensive lineman from LSU, and I talked to him at the combine a little bit. I forget his name off the top of my head, but you can look at the mocks and throw his name out there, Joseph, if you know him. Let me see here. I don't have it up on my thing.
Walker or
no, offensive tackle from LSU.
Offensive tackle. Okay, hold on. Campbell or
yeah, Campbell.
Yeah.
Campbell, and they question his arm length.
Yeah.
So everybody I've looked at, the only guys I haven't heard negatives about, which is kind of funny, are the 2 tight ends at the top. The kid Tyler Warren from Penn State, who I've watched him play a couple times too. I don't see anything wrong with his game at all. He's that versatile and that good. And then some people suggest the Colts might take Loveland, the tight end from Michigan, because they like big tight ends. Now, I'm a Bowling Green grad, and we had a kid there this year that set the world on fire for Bowling Green. His 2 best games were against top competition, including Penn State. He torched Penn State. So I don't buy that the MAC isn't good enough to have a really good pick. He might be a sleeper pick, maybe 2nd, 3rd round. So anyway, no Robert De Niro's because we just ran down 5, 6 names right there, and you could list a criticism of each one. And I know there are lots of tape, and other people say, "Oh, well, you're just taking the critical angle," but that's the job of these guys. That's the job of scouts. That's the job of teams to fine-tooth comb everyone because, it's often said if you miss on a top 10 pick, you're setting your team back because you expect him to start. You expect him to make immediate contribution, and when he doesn't, it hurts you.
All right, so I got 2 questions here. If Sanders doesn't go in the top 3, 5 picks, do you think New Orleans is a good fit for him, or does he fall all the way to Pittsburgh? And what's the deal? What do you hear about Aaron Rodgers? Is he going to be retired? Is he going to come back? Is he going to go to Minnesota? Is he going to go to Pittsburgh? It's still many questions with Rodgers.
Well, I'm glad you asked me about Sanders because I covered his old man. And I can give you, if you don't mind me filling the air with a little bit of time and a little bit of history here. Deion Sanders is a great kick returner, one of the best you'll ever see. And his flash and style and substance for knowing the arena and the interviews and, I'm prime time and all this, you wouldn't have a bigger celebrity status type guy than Deion. I thought he was an above average corner. All right. And I know I saw him get burned more than once or not try and stick his nose in there and make a tackle and say, well, that was a business decision. Well, what kind of character guy is that he didn't want to stick his nose in there against the big running back because he's afraid of getting hurt? I watched Marvin Harrison beat Deion on a double move down the middle of the field in the early 2000s, and Deion quit on it. He just flat out quit. Marvin caught it with 20 yards to spare and walked in for like a 50, 60-yard touchdown. And afterwards, a Cowboy writer asked him, what happened on that play, and he insulted the writer. Said, you're like a sissy in prison. All right? When Deion was playing baseball, he didn't want to do interviews when he came through the minor league racket with Louisville, and we couldn't talk to him. he refused to do interviews. So I'm a little wary of his son because he came to the combine with that same bravado, that same cockiness, which I like a sure, confident guy. You know, I don't mind a quarterback expressing belief in himself. But he went even farther, saying, there are haters out there, and they've always hated our family because of my dad. And all. Well, yeah, you're right. There are some haters. Maybe I'm one of them because as good as your dad was, there's a downside to acting like that when you don't play well or you don't live up to it. And I'm nervous about Sanders because, like we said before, the quarterbacks aren't rated highly. And if he doesn't go to the Saints, I don't know if the Steelers jump at him. I don't know. The Steelers, I read some other needs today for the Steelers, and that included interior defensive line and running back. And I don't know if maybe they're looking at somebody else, at that spot. The second part of your equation after I rambled, Aaron Rodgers, I'd love to tell you that I think he's going to end up with the Steelers and he's going to keep playing because everybody's fascinated with Aaron Rodgers and they're polarized by him. I personally have had enough of him. I've had enough of him for a while. I didn't see a guy that could lead my team to the playoffs or even the Super Bowl in the 2 years with the Jets. Now, yeah, he got hurt the first year, but golly gee willikers, Aaron, did you do your homework? Did you not know that the Jets had a crap offensive line when you went there? Everybody else did. So, golly gee, you got drilled 3 or 4 plays into your Jets career and you're hurt. And then he goes on McAfee, I think, and acts like an idiot for 2 years, running his mouth about conspiracy theories and thinking he's a political analyst to address other issues in the world. I'm still waiting to hear his take on tariffs. If he's going to keep addressing politics instead of football. I want to see a guy that in his prime was really good. I mean, I went in there with the Colts to Green Bay early in his career and watched him kick the snot out of the Colts and Peyton Manning. And that guy was a gunslinger. That guy, you just thought he could do anything. And that guy I haven't seen in 2 or 3 years. And I don't know. If I'm Pittsburgh and I grew up a Steeler fan, I got a Mean Joe Green jersey framed on my wall over here. I was a fan of the Steel Curtain. But if I'm the Steelers, am I a little wary of another old quarterback thinking maybe he could recapture magic after the Russell Wilson thing didn't work? Russell looked like he might be okay. He started slow, then he looked like he'd be okay in the middle, and then toward the end, where are you, Russell? So the question you asked about Sanders, he could fall out of the first round. I've
That's
read
my
some
next
people
question.
yeah, he could fall out of the first round, which, boy, wouldn't that bruise the old ego of the family there?
That's right.
And then Aaron Rodgers, my gut tells me he wants to be wanted. He wants to be coveted, like he's still what he was. And he might decide, you know what, I'm going to wait. And I'm going to see who gets hurt and see what team comes calling begging me to be the savior and the hero after they're in September and their quarterback's dead. And they need somebody to come in and try and save the day.
It's funny that you mentioned that because right now I see there is some rumors. This is coming from Pro Football Talk, hearing some rumors that the San Francisco 49ers may trade Brock Purdy if they have a deal with Aaron Rodgers at draft day.
Wow.
And of course, Aaron Rodgers loves, he grew up as a 49er fan. So if you, put the puzzle together, can Aaron Rodgers be the guy who could take them and win the Super Bowl? San Fran is built for that.
Yeah, they've got a good defense. They've got some weapons on offense. They got a great tight end in Kittle. Where do they deal Purdy to? And I feel kind of bummed about that because Purdy was that classic overachieving low draft pick, wasn't he like the last guy picked or something? I mean, he just
Mr. Irrelevant.
Yeah, and that never happens. A guy late in the draft. I mean, maybe some guy from Michigan, and I'm an Ohio State guy, so I shouldn't say that out loud, but maybe some guy from Michigan in 1999, I think, was drafted in the 6th round and then became the GOAT or the legend, Tom Brady. Maybe he gives hope to every late round pick that you could still be a Hall of Famer, but for every Tom Brady, you probably throw 100 guys out there that didn't last a week or a year in the league, boy, that'd be a heck of a thing. John Lynch, rolling the dice on a guy who, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, because again, I'm not trying to be anti Aaron Rodgers all the way. When he was in his prime, I liked him. I thought he was as confident and as good as anybody. He always seemed to take care of the ball. He didn't throw a lot of interceptions, a lot of high touchdown marks. But isn't he just a 1-year rental at this point? Isn't he 1 or 2-year rental? And Brock Purdy's still
the quarterback who's 40 years old, coming off an Achilles injury. Right? He needs to be protected. He needs the offensive line, like he said a couple minutes ago. Before I could throw it back to Norm, they just announced the Hall of Fame game on July 31st. It is Detroit and the Chargers. So Detroit and the Chargers, July 31st, the Hall of Fame game. Norm, go ahead.
Yeah, so if this draft is, comparatively speaking, Phil, as we're saying off the top, so mediocre, no, pardon the pun, Academy Award winners are not likely. How many has De Niro won, by the way? I think he's won 2. Not to veer too much. No, I was just trying to remember how many Academy Awards Robert De Niro has won.
Oh, wow.
It might be 2, but I could be wrong, and I apologize if I'm wrong, Mr. De Niro. Who's probably a big NFL fan.
He'll fix you. Put it that way. He'll fix you. So that's
yeah. I don't have any trouble with.
I think he's won more Academy Awards than Aaron Rodgers has Super Bowl rings, if that helps.
Okay, well, that's probably
Aaron's
got
a good 1. I think 2 is a safe bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, anyways, having said that, does this, if the draft is that mediocre, does this drive even further free agency, training camp cuts in both the NFL, and sometimes we see the odd CFL player get a shot at the NFL. Not that many make it, but a couple of them do. So if you're a GM, head coach in the NFL, and the draft's that mediocre, you're not really banking on any, Cinderella stories. What do you do to make up for your needs? I mean, what else can you do other than trades or free agency?
Well, yeah, I mean, trades and free agency. Now, that said, there are so many guys that are going to get drafted, and you have to think that, a certain percentage are going to be quality NFL players. So maybe your expectations are lower because he's not a flash and dash impact guy, but maybe he looks like he projects to be a solid player, a linebacker that doesn't miss tackles and is fast, a corner who has really good hand-to-hand skills at the point of attack and can jam guys, be good in certain types of schemes, a pass rusher with a great move and great upside, but doesn't play the run. Well, that spells a lot of them. So you might look for certain skill sets in players like that, and you think, hey, this guy might be able to develop into a good player. And in the meantime, like you said, yeah, you gotta find diamonds in the rough somewhere, whether it's signing guys in free agency and overpaying, because that's what free agency is. We're overpaying for the guys available a lot of times. The real trick to free agency a lot of times, I think, is when you're waiting to see who's going to be available and for how long. Because, we get to March and everybody goes hog wild nuts, and you get these tips, and so-and-so is signed. It'll be official when the league calendar starts, people can't help it. They leak this. Oh, we got this guy committed. We got this guy signed. And then there's a cooling off. And I always wonder how good GMs do when they're playing I guess you could say it's Russian roulette or chicken. Maybe chicken's better than using a fatal. You're playing chicken with a lot of these guys because you want to see who might still be available later. When situations change, when circumstances are different, and a guy still needs a job, and he's willing to lower his price a little bit because, well, we're not going to overpay that much for a guy, like that. And you might add some guys there toward the end or toward later on in the process, and I tell you what, I won't knock the CFL because I think you get talent from anywhere you can, and there are good players up there in Canada. And for the record, I love Canada. So if I'm going to bring up the word tariff, I'm going to say I love Canada. And I hope that people in Canada don't blame us, American citizens, for the acts of some stupid people in power positions of authority. But I won't get too political because I'm not Aaron Rodgers. I'll leave that to him or Matt. But you find talent wherever you can find it. And the Colts had a record for a while. And it was pretty impressive. And I'm sorry that I'm rusty on the numbers, but they had an undrafted free agent make the roster for like 10, 15 years in a row. And we always wondered, we'd look at the roster and we'd say, okay, when they release their undrafted signees, we always say, all right, which one of these guys is going to be that guy this year? Because for 15, 16, 17, whatever it was, we could bank on an undrafted guy making the roster. And sometimes he would last a while, so but you're right, it's not easy. These GMs you speak of, they get paid so much money and they miss on their first pick in the draft, or they don't put together a solid group of additions, whether it's free agency or undrafted guys, and you wonder how they make the money they make while we all struggle to keep afloat in our advancing years. It's like, oh, it must be nice. Good gig if you can get it.
So on that note, I'm going to ask you, give me one, I guess, sleeper that you would suggest. And I got to ask this because I don't know if you know this. Some guy studied at Syracuse. I want to ask you about the quarterback, Kyle McCord. Do you think he gets selected, played from in Syracuse? So I just have to throw that out for the legend.
Okay,
well, the former backup at Ohio State University too.
I'm a Buckeye. I don't know, Norm. You remember?
That's what he said. That's why I didn't want to say it.
That's why I'm glad he mentioned it.
Well, I almost put on an Ohio State hat, and I thought, well, I don't want to bias my interview. People see Ohio State and think, oh, he's a front runner. They can't beat the team up north, but they win the national championship. He's a front runner. No, I've been a Buckeye since a kid. Kyle McCord lost his job at Ohio State because he lost the most important game and threw two bad picks up in Ann Arbor, and was basically told, we're going to go another direction. Now, I know he tried to make it sound like, well, I was looking for another opportunity, a better opportunity. Well, listen, they weren't even looking at Kyle McCord, all right? They were looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. back in the day. And they said, this Kyle McCord guy, he's not bad. Maybe we'll add him too. Kyle did some good things at Syracuse. I saw him, put up some good numbers. I also saw him run his mouth about karma. And I thought, okay, whatever. I guess if you have sour grapes about, not being the guy, you could make the argument he deserved another chance at Ohio State for his last year. But then I guess we don't have too many complaints in Columbus with how Will Howard played and what Will Howard showed us, in leading us to the national championship. He didn't have a great game against Michigan either, but he got a chance to redeem himself in the playoffs, and he played great. He played lights out in the playoffs. So the answer to your question, yeah, could Kyle McCord be a sleeper? Sure. He can throw the ball. He can toss it around. And I think he's grown a little bit from his days at Ohio State. But, hell, I like the guy that Ohio State had over him. I have no regrets about them going with Will Howard, who looks like more of a prototypical quarterback in size, arm strength, moxie, Kyle's a little smaller, but that, you know, I don't want to be anti Drew Brees here. Drew Brees was small, and I covered him a little bit at Purdue, and I remember all the people said, well, he's under 6 foot, so he's not going to make it, or he won't be able to see over the line. You know, well, you know, you guys get too caught up in measurables, you know, and you don't think about how the quarterback position starts from the neck up. You know, I don't remember who said that, but then you go down the list of quarterbacks that didn't have, you know, Joe Montana was supposed to be, you know, too slow, or his arm wasn't strong enough. Peyton Manning wasn't supposed to have a strong enough arm either. You know, and yet, you know, the late Bobby Beathard stuck with Ryan Leaf thinking he had the guy he wanted, and Ryan Leaf basically retired him for being a bust. So you just never know. But I wouldn't discount him. I think a mid-round pick for a guy with a chip on his shoulder who's going to come out firing, you never know. You don't say he can't. You just say it might be a project thing where he has to learn as he goes along. He wouldn't be my sleeper. I mentioned my sleeper earlier, and I think the guy's name is Fannin, the tight end from Bowling Green. I'm telling you, I watched a couple games, and then I saw some highlights because I thought, well, he's just doing it against MAC competition, and then he lights up Penn State, just torches the Nittany Lions defense, which Ohio State didn't even do. Ohio State had to win a tough, hard-nosed game to beat Penn State in their building. You know, and Will Howard made a couple clutch plays toward the end of that, and they won. But I think, in fact, they didn't allow an offensive touchdown in that game. But Fannin tore them up. They couldn't cover him, you know. And he's like a wide receiver who's big enough to play tight end. But I think when I saw an interview with him, he said what excites him the most is I can play anywhere, I can play any position, and he's a guy that could fall in the 3rd or 4th round because he played in the MAC. I don't think he'll fall that far. I think somebody will jump at him. Just like you mentioned Sanders earlier, you know, because there's a fascination with quarterbacks and people think, well, let's take a shot on NFL pedigree. You know, maybe Sanders is the real deal, but he just needs a little time. And maybe someone will jump and get him, because why not take a shot on a guy with NFL pedigree as opposed to a tight end from Bowling Green or somewhere that they don't even know exists, you know. I always am amused at the first round because certain teams seem to screw it up routinely, and they, like, when they make the pick, you know, you don't need to hear fans groan. You just need to say, "Oh, geez, what are they thinking? What are they doing?" I mean, you know, why do they always, you know? And I don't know. I would like to know. The one question I have right now about quarterbacks is where's Kirk Cousins going to end up? I'm kind of curious.
That was my next question. So,
well, there you go, Joseph. I'd like to know that, because maybe that's a domino that has to fall some way, you know, before Aaron decides what he wants to do. I don't think Pittsburgh likes the idea of being stood up at the altar or even being made to wait. I think they're probably put off by Aaron. So what's Kirk Cousins going to do? Atlanta, you know, we were all kind of scratching our heads and wondering what was Atlanta thinking, signing him to a big money deal and drafting a kid and saying he's our quarterback of the future. Well, why'd you give, you know, maybe an above average NFL quarterback that much money only to say he's not your future? The Falcons right now fall in that category of, well, if we can screw it up, we're going to. The Raiders seem to do that real well too. I'd be interested to see if the Raiders screw up their number 6 pick or whatever, and, you know, try to pick some guys that maybe might be NFL ready or NFL capable. You know, some teams just don't seem to do that.
So I'm going to ask you, I know it's fairly early, and we got this question from a guy named Rogers Aaron. All right. So who's your Super Bowl pick from Rogers Aaron? Because he wants to go to that team, he says.
Yeah, of course he does. Yeah. I mean, you know, that San Francisco rumor would be a hot rumor, man.
That's more interesting than anything in NFL draft.
Well, now that we've trashed him a bit and we've made it obvious Robert De Niro's won more Academy Awards than Aaron Rodgers has Super Bowl rings. He needs to get that second ring, Who do I like? I really liked the Lions last year. I really liked the Lions. I was surprised that it didn't pan out for them, although I don't know. I've got a couple buddies from the Midwest who are Michigan guys, obviously, and aside from needling me about Ohio State not winning that game, they're Lions fans. They're diehard, and I would text them or they'd text me, and I don't remember a time where a defense took more hits injury-wise and got depleted like the Lions last year. It seemed criminal to me because I thought they were built to do it. I really did. I thought the offense was good enough. The weapons on offense are really good. The two running backs, the wide receivers. And the defense had guys, they're pulling guys off the street to play valuable minutes because nobody could stay healthy.
Yep.
They're adding a pass rusher because, their big stud, got hurt. Was Hutchinson? Yeah. I mean, he's flat out phenomenal player, and he gets hurt and lost for the year. And so I liked the Lions a lot last year, and I know injuries are the great equalizer. You take enough of them in the wrong positions, and you go from being the favorite to a maybe, and one bad day in January and you're done. And I've seen that here in Indy more than a couple times. My wife likes to remind me all the time that we should have won more than one Super Bowl in the Manning era, that we were in the playoffs every year and we had really good teams and we only did it one time. And when I did my Colts book back in 2014 and I interviewed a lot of the old Colts, they told me that the team the year before the Super Bowl was their best one, the one the Steelers upset in the playoffs. That was
at least you guys won one. I'm a Buffalo Bills fan.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh yeah.
I got Josh Allen here, who was arguably, he's the player of the year last year, MVP, and they can't get through a guy that Buffalo made Kansas City pick with that trade. Pat Mahomes should have been a Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, I thought when the Bills were ahead and had the ball, I thought that was the key moment of that game. I thought, okay, no more excuses, no more, the overtime rule didn't give us the ball and give us a chance. No more, crazy Mahomes magic stuff. I thought, here's a chance, jugular, you're ahead, you need to add more. You need to, dictate and put your foot down on them. And I think they went 3 and out and punted. They didn't do much. And then when you give the Chiefs a chance and the door opens back up, and it broke my heart because my doctor brother is a Bills fan. He's been diehard. And I know we left 2 of those 4 Super Bowl parties when they lost 4 in a row.
All right, Norm, take over this show because I need some Kleenex to cry still. Come on.
I know. Well, we left them early because my brother couldn't stand it anymore. He couldn't watch. We stayed for the one way, the Norwood miss.
Yeah, he had to mention that. Look, he had to. I'm convinced if they would have kicked that field goal, they would have won at least 2 out of 4. I'm convinced of that.
So. They were a better team. They got into a game where you're up against a great defensive coordinator. I'm not trying to blow smoke up Bill Belichick's butt, but everybody knows he's a defensive mind, and they had to slow down the K gun, and so the Bills had 19, 20 minutes time possession that game, and they still would have won. They still should have won the game, but the Giants were able to occupy the clock with a mediocre quarterback and a guy named Otis Anderson.
Yes.
Running back who.
All right, come on.
Anyway, whatever. The Bills are in the conversation, man. No, the funny thing was, I was vacationing recently, and I was in the airport, and I ran into a guy who was a Bills fan, and he was very critical of the coach.
That's what I've been telling Norm, Sean McDermott. I'm surprised he's still here.
I'm bringing it up to you because he thinks McDermott's time has passed and that he's had enough chances to get over the hump. I will tell you this, Joseph, and it's not going to be much consolation. I can see the suffering in your face, and what little I can see on my phone here, I can see what you've been through, but I felt it through my brother, okay? When I was doing ESPN spots every now and then, way back when, and they didn't pay me a dime for my knowledge, but I was on with Bob Lee and Outside the Lines, I think it was, or whatever his show was. And that was a big deal, you know. I mean, next to being on with legendary Norm Rumack, I was on with Bob Lee on ESPN. So those are two things that they might want to write that up in my eulogy, or, you know, and remember that, you know, it was who was friends with Norm Rumack and knew who Bob Lee was, you know. But anyway, Bob Lee.
At least you got a sense of humor, Phil.
You like that? Well, Bob Lee asked me the question, and it was before the Colts went on their run. He said, "When does the window close on a great quarterback?" And I was like, he gave me the questions ahead of time, so I knew it was coming, and I wasn't sure how to answer it because it's basically putting you on the spot. Are you an optimist or a pessimist? If you have a great quarterback, how long is that window there with the guys around him? And so I consulted with a friend of mine, I'll name drop here, Rick Gossel of Dallas. He's one of the longest running NFL writers and still does it. He's a good friend of mine and a hockey guy. He's a diehard Red Wing guy. We've suffered through the Red Wing misery for years now. But Rick said to me, the quarterback or the window never closes because he's a great quarterback. And that was the answer Bob Lee got. I quoted Rick to him, and the Colts went out and won a Super Bowl after that, you know, because everybody was saying, well, gee, the Colts have been close. The Colts have been close. It's never going to happen. They've been in the playoffs how many years in a row? It's never going to happen. They find a way to screw it up. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar? So say Patrick Mahomes trips over a Donald Trump book when he's bashing people at his home and injures an ankle and can't make it to the playoffs this year, and the Bills have a clear shot to get there. You know,
I don't want to get there. I want to win. If I get there, they're going to be 1-5.
Well, who else do you fear? Who else do you fear in the AFC?
It's Kansas City. They got to get over the hump of Kansas City.
Right.
And
There's nobody else to fear. So you have to get over that, and anything can happen. And then I think, you know, you might have to worry about Detroit, but didn't Buffalo go into Detroit and play one of the best games they played in years?
Yeah.
And yeah, I know Detroit had the injuries on defense and all that, but that was the Buffalo team that would have beaten Kansas City if they played like that on offense, because they were lights out that game. And they put their foot on the jugular, and they didn't let the Lions back up. But you know, I still think the window's still open for your guys. I'm not just saying that to patronize. I'm saying that from experience. I'm a 60-year-old man now. I'm how many years removed from 2007 when the Colts finally did it? You know, it's 18 years ago.
Yep.
And yet the advice I got from a legendary sports writer, he was spot on. The window never closes on a great quarterback because he's great. Josh Allen's a great quarterback. If enough guys make plays around, if the defense does its job a little bit, the window hasn't closed yet.
You mentioned ESPN. My final question, and then Norm will close it out. We have to talk about, he just passed away, Mike Patrick there. Do you know him, and your thoughts about Mike Patrick?
Is that for me or Norm?
No, for you, and then Norm will have
I'm sorry. I never got to meet Mike. I saw the ticker, I saw the line, and I thought, you know, I remember seeing the image of his face in my head, and it's like, wow, he was around forever and kind of a pretty cool guy, it seemed like. But I can't say that I knew him. I wouldn't want to pass myself off as saying I knew him. But, you know, it's I think it's a statement in itself that us sports guys, and let's face it, we're all sports junkies and sports guys, how sentimental we get when a name that we don't know we know from our association with sports, we don't know personally, but we get sentimental about it. And it's kind of a statement or a testament to someone's greatness or value. Well, I remember that guy. Yeah, he was pretty good at that. Yeah, I really liked him. Even some announcers maybe we didn't know. I'll give you another example here. I'm going to guess that none of us ever met Wink Martindale.
No.
He just passed away too, right? But
Yeah.
you remember him, right? Because he was a game show host all the time on these shows. Joker. It's like, oh, Wink Martindale. Not the old Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator, but the game show host. So yeah, I mean, I get sentimental when I hear about names like that, guys like Mike Patrick, and think, wow, he did it for a while, and he was, you don't do it for as long as he did it, and you weren't good at it. He was good at it, and again, I'd say it's a testament when sports guys like us just shooting it up and talking about different things. And I say, well, no, I didn't know him personally, but the fact that it resonated with me that he died, that tells me he made a mark.
All right, Norm, you go ahead, you close it out here.
All right, how many minutes do we have till the top of the hour, Joe? Just so I know.
It's already past the top of the hour.
Oh, all right. So I'll make it.
Minus 3 minutes.
I talk too
What's
much.
that?
I know.
No. We like guests who are very verbose. That's a good thing. All right.
I think
so.
I covered the top.
So if last year Detroit was a bit of a Cinderella, and people were hoping, finally enough of Kansas City, but too bad it wasn't Detroit. But maybe this year, or maybe Buffalo, another Cinderella for a long time. Are there any teams aside from Buffalo and Detroit who are looking for their first Super Bowls and first playoff, tremendous success? Well, for the Bills, it would be a tremendous success. They've done a lot of great things, including their 4 Super Bowl runs previously. But for the Lions, especially, they hadn't even done anything in the playoffs for decades. Is there any other team or teams, plural, that have a shot to be a bit of a lot of a Cinderella this year?
Yeah, and we can't include the Eagles because the Eagles cemented their legacy with that win last year. So the Eagles are in that Chiefs category. Then you have the Lions, the Bills. I want to say the Niners maybe, but I don't know. The Niners, they seem like heartbreakers, and it seemed like something just doesn't go right for them. And I'm not sure whether Brock Purdy's their quarterback or not. I'm not sure about the Niners. But then again, you just asked a really good question, Norm, and I'm going through my mental Rolodex while you're phrasing the question. I'm thinking, okay, I know
where's a team to watch out for.
Yeah,
like would Cincinnati be in that category?
If they had if they knew how to play defense, they right now they don't even want to. Did they finally sign their pass rusher?
No.
So they signed their 2 wide receivers and broke the bank for $70 million or whatever the hell they gave both of them. And yet they're telling the guy who led the league in the sacks that, well, your price is a little high. What? My price is too high. What are you talking about?
With the wide receivers, it's because of the quarterback. Quarterback wants the wide receivers. He doesn't look at the other end of the ball, Hendrickson. So it should be interesting to see, because that guy's getting fed up with Cincinnati, where he goes.
I would be. I would purposely take less money to go somewhere for 1 year, do it again, and then hit a payday just to shove it up, Cincinnati's wazoo, so to speak. But I don't think they have a defense, and they fired their defensive coordinator and the Colts hired him. So I don't know what that means about the Colts defense, which has been struggling for years. They hired the guy, and I don't know. It feels like a lot of retread action here on that front. But on offense, oh man, there's nobody more you want to have on your fantasy team, and the games are all fun. You know, they're always exciting. I mean, Joe Burrow, former Buckeye, who could sling it with the best of them, man. I mean, and he showed a lot of heart. Some of those losses, man, you think, well, yeah, but he lost. Yeah, but did you see how he played? Did you see how he gutted it? You see how he kept slinging it? I mean, the guy's trying his butt off. But yeah, Colts weren't going to win with Peyton until they built a defense, until they got some defensive guys. So I'd like to say Bengals, but in good faith, good conscience, I can't. I went through that whole division, and I'm not a Lamar Jackson fan. So the Ravens always seem to be in the conversation for a sleeper, and then they find a way to screw it up. I think their defense is just okay, and Lamar can be great at times and then disappears. I don't know. I don't see anybody. I don't see anybody else in the East. I'm thinking down AFC South. No, and people might say, "Well, the Houston Texans they got C.J. Stroud." They still got a ways to go. They got to build more. And you go out west. I mean, seriously, the Bills are looking at the Chiefs and saying, if we could beat these guys, we could get it done. And then and I don't think the Chargers are legit yet. I don't think. And then look at the NFC. Look for sleepers in the NFC.
Washington did surprise again.
Washington did surprise a little bit.
Yeah.
But their problem was still the same as a lot of teams. You still got to add more on defense. You need more playmakers. You need to be able to. I think their pass rush a little spotty, and I don't know if they have the defense, but boy, the kid they drafted. I mean, Daniels was phenomenal.
Yeah.
What more could you want from a rookie to know you've got the right guy? He certainly proved he's the right guy. So again, you got a great quarterback. You have a chance. I don't see anybody else in that division worth talking about. And it's Eagles and Washington. Who am I missing? Who am I missing in the NFC that you think?
You're spot on. You've been spot on. Because you talked about you
think the Vikings might be able to do it? I mean,
depending who they have, I don't think their rookie quarterback, or now he's going to play for the rookie. But last year, coming off the injury he came off, he needs another year of playing in the NFL, because it never happens. From Washington, Jalen Daniels, he's not going to be Jalen Daniels, right? So I think Minnesota needs a good year too. But go ahead.
Hey, Phil, I got to get ready for work. So in a minute or two before we wrap it up, I don't want to be late for work. That's for sure. Or otherwise, I'll be doing this full time.
I'm trying to give you a good answer. I felt bad.
I was going to talk about Pat McAfee from Indianapolis, who makes as much money as Norm.
Anyway, so the final question for you, Phil. We mentioned you're an author of a couple of books. Why don't you go ahead and plug them before we wrap up the show?
Well, I wrote 100 Things Colts Fans Know and Do Before They Die. And I contributed on a couple other books that when I worked at the Star, there were Super Bowl books and recap type things of the Colts when they won. But 100 Things Colts Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die was released in 2014, and I still get a chance every now and then to sign one of them. And it was a joy, a labor of love doing that book and writing it for the fans' perspective, because let's face it, we're all doing what we do in the media for the fans. So I felt like it was just something I really got to enjoy doing. And thank you for bringing it up. It's a good memory. And every now and then somebody tells me, somebody told me they buried a Colts fan with the book, and I was like touched by that. I was like, wow. I mean, I don't know if that was an indictment of the person's life or not. I don't know, but I was touched by the gesture.
All right. Well, Phil Wilson, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Longtime journalist with the Indianapolis Star, covering the Colts and the NFL, and a diehard still Detroit Red Wings fan, heartbroken again without a playoff. Talk about frustration.
Yeah, the days we made the playoffs, we just made them. Now we can't make it now. It's killing me. And it's worse than the Bills. It really is. It's
No,
worse
it's
than the
not.
Bills.
No, it's not. I'm a Leaf fan. It's even worse being a Leaf fan than the Bills, than Detroit. Come on. And none of these what's happened. We'll go back.
I'm trying to make Joseph feel better. That's all I'm trying to do.
Thanks a lot.
He's laughing, so that's a good sign. Hey, Phil, it's a pleasure to have you on with Joe and I here on the Fired Up Network. Thanks so much for doing it. And, we'd love to have you back on during the NFL season for sure.
I don't do these very often anymore, so I'm happy to talk to you guys. And thanks for having me on. And Norm, it's always great to hear from you, and great to meet you, Joseph. And let's chop it up again sometime real soon.
We'll do that for sure, Philip Wilson. Thank you so much, buddy.
Cheers.